So this evening we are continuing our 67 True Scary Stories article from thoughtcatalog.com. These have been some wild stories. Like, some of them really catch me off guard, like the ones where, it's just the story, you're not really sure where it's going, and then bam, they find a dead person. Let's get back to the stories. So the next one is called Indian in the Cupboard. I once worked as a live-in staff member in a college dormitory. During the summer, we housed the few summer school students who remained on campus, nearly 30. It may be significant to point out that these students tended towards the highly academically motivated, oftentimes high-stress students, if quiet. One warm day in late June, my office received a call from a concerned sibling that she and her family were unable to reach her brother, who lived by himself in a room on the summer school floor. This wasn't unusual, as our office frequently dealt with students avoiding their kith and kin due to frayed nerves or general social awkwardness. Aww. Our normal protocol to check on a student is to try to reach them by our emergency contact information. Failing that, go check their room to verify they're living in the building and perhaps available then and there. Then have them call their family to verify we followed up on the original request. Also, we are to only enter a room with another staff member present to ensure personal safety of staff and students. I failed to reach this student on his room and mobile phone, and was working short-staffed, so since I was on my own, I decided to pop up to his room and check on him. I arrived on his floor around 2 in the afternoon, and the floor seemed deserted as I had expected. I found his room number and immediately noticed the sound of a movie playing on a TV or computer from behind the door. Oh god. I don't like where this is going, I really don't. But then again, I have no idea where it's going, so anyway. I knocked 3 times and announced that I was a staff member checking on his health and safety. No answer. I didn't think this was that remarkable. College students are notorious for leaving electronics running while not in the room. I checked the floor showers and bathrooms and found them deserted. I returned to his door and knocked 3 more times, waiting about 20 seconds between each knock. No answer. This is when my instincts started to buzz. I worked in residence halls a number of years as a professional, and something about all the pieces of this puzzle were not adding up. Family concern about his health and safety, electronics running, someone must have started them recently, within the time frame of a movie runtime. Summer school students and their idiosyncratic behavior, something wasn't right. I was by myself, so I probably let myself get more worked up than if I was with someone else. A deserted room floor, even at 2 in the afternoon, oftentimes evokes Kubrician memories of the Overlook Hotel. I decided that for some sense of closure or sanity, I needed the immediate resolution of keying into the student's room, even though I was by myself and not technically supposed to do so. I knocked on the door 1 more time for good measure. Again, announced myself as the hall director. I keyed into the room and my spider sense went off even stronger. The room appeared relatively vacant. The student appeared to be living out of a suitcase, which is unusual for someone staying no less than 8 weeks for a summer school session. The bedding was tussled like someone had been sleeping in it, and all the lights in the room were on. And as I had suspected, there was an open laptop on a desk running on battery power playing The Matrix, but no student. I began to start rationalizing to keep from feeling unsettled. Surely the student and I had crossed paths on my way to his room. I'd never met him before, so I wouldn't recognize him otherwise. And perhaps he was just down in the lobby picking up delivery food for late lunch. Sure, that's it. Then I turned to leave, planning on trying to reach the student later in the afternoon or that night. As I turned to leave, I noticed another odd piece of evidence. The accordion closet doors, which are doors. Then my intuition spiked higher than ever. Shit. I realized I was alone in a room with a potentially suicidal student who may in fact have completed just that. And I am about to be that guy who discovers the body and then has a shitstorm of paperwork and undesirable tasks. Really? That's what you're thinking about right now? The paperwork? Not the least of which would be calling the family back to break the news. I felt like I was talking to myself when my voice cracked as I spoke to the closed doors and announced my name and title, and that I would be opening those accordion doors in 3 seconds. I fumbled with the latch on the doors and finally managed to get them disengaged. And as I slid the doors apart, I was unprepared. I don't know what I really expected. A hanging, a gunshot wound. I'll tell you what I didn't expect. A 7-foot dark-skinned Indian man staring at me embarrassingly, as though I had found his secret hangout. We stared at each other for a good 15 seconds without blinking, breathing, or speaking. 7 foot! I finally realized what was going on, and my natural emotion was disbelief. All I could think to say was, are you in here hiding from me? He looked at me and said, yeah. My heart was still racing. I turned to leave, and before I shut his door, I turned back to him and said, call your sister. She's worried about you, and frankly, I am too. That was not the outcome that I was expecting. I'm glad he was okay, but like, what? The next one is called Then Who Was Security? Security at my old building came by to change the locks. Then a few hours later, security came by to change the locks. The next one is called Cat. I'm entering a disclaimer. It was not a mountain lion. I live in the sticks in Michigan, but a decent-sized neighborhood with about 20 houses. Our streets make 2 circles. I was home with my toddler who was taking a nap. I'm on my back porch drinking coffee around noon. There's a piercing scream that seems to last at least 30 seconds. I am startled, so I go out of my fence and walk up my driveway to look around. There is a man hauling ass down the street, cradling his arm and dripping blood on the concrete. He sees me and shouts, "Did you see that fucking cat? Which way did it go?" I saw no animal. I asked if he needed help, but he declined, saying an ambulance was on its way and just needed to find the cat. Perplexed, I pull off my long sleeve and hand it to the guy, telling him to at least wrap his injury. He holds up his arm, and his fingers are mangled. A house cat did this to you, as I gently helped him wrap his hand. This wasn't a regular cat, we just have to find him. So I help him look. So do a few of our neighbors. Ambulance arrives, a few houses down at his place. So we walk down and sit on the curb. Suddenly commotion from the other way and half a dozen people sprinting to the cul-de-sac to corner this animal. It disappears around a house and we hear a volley of barking. Another man comes from behind the house, running at full speed towards the ambo. I'm still sitting with bloody guy, and running guy gives him a tissue. I almost fainted and probably would have if I were standing. In it was bloody guy's thumb and first finger with a bit of tissue and nasty. We never caught the cat, and I didn't get a good enough look at whatever it was to figure it out. Bloody guy said he was weeding his garden and this giant black fuzzy thing with teeth and a tail chomped his hand under the bush and ran. He tried to follow it, but it was too fast. He said it stood taller than his knees and he was like 6'5". Got his digits stuck back on properly though, and has since fenced his backyard. Jesus. Psycho cat. The next one is called Haunted Tattoo Shop. Worked in a tattoo shop where 2 of the past owners had died. One of them died just a block away from the shop, and it was rumored that the shop was haunted and cursed. knew the dead shop owner was there, and I knew he was just causing occasional mayhem to fuck with us. Nothing malicious, but definitely haunting that place. The next one is called People Are Scarier Than Ghosts. Boy, you got that right, brother. I used to work at a Boy Scout summer camp. Every week I had to take a big group of campers to a secluded spot for their wilderness survival badge, where they had to build a shelter out of sticks, leaves, etc., and sleep in it overnight. The spot was only about a half mile from the main camp, but we took them on a circuitous route that made it seem really secluded. Anyways, on this one night, all the campers had made their shelters. We had cooked dinner, and we were all just sitting around the campfire. It was getting late, maybe 11 o'clock, so I sent all the campers to their shelters for the night and started cleaning up the fire. That's when we heard in the distance what sounded like church bells. They were pretty faint, but myself and my fellow staffers could definitely hear them. They went on for about 30 minutes, ringing every 30 seconds or so. We were all a little creeped out as there were no churches or towns within 20 miles of us. After the bells stopped, though, the singing started. Singing. It was too faint to hear the words, but it sounded like church choir music, but a lot of people and a lot more enthusiastic. Also, it was almost midnight at this point. The singing went on for well over an hour, sometimes quieting down until we almost couldn't hear it, sometimes getting so loud we thought it was getting closer. All of the campers were super creeped out, but I lied to them, telling them there was a church service going on in camp, and that there was nothing to be scared of. Eventually, at almost 1 a.m., the singing stopped. I found out a few days later that there had been a large KKK rally only a few miles away that night, and that's what we heard. Dude. No. The next story is called Coworker Apparition. This isn't creepy, but it gave me pause for thought. I was returning to my office having finished a meeting. As I approached the door, I saw my colleague walk from the left of the office to the right, presumably returning to his desk. As I entered the office, I started to say, "Hey, Mitt," stopping abruptly upon the realization that nobody else was in the office with me. I'm not sure what exactly I witnessed, but it was clear enough and detailed enough to convince me 100% that my colleague would be in there. How is that not creepy? That is creepy. The next story is called At Least It Wasn't the Other Way Around. A few months ago, I had this really scary dream that seemed so real. In my dream, I was in my bed doing something on my laptop. Suddenly, I just had a bad feeling something wasn't right. Like I somehow knew something was in my room with me that shouldn't be there. I jump off my bed and hurry and flip my light on. I flip it on just in time to see this weird black shadow sphere thing with legs zoom under my bed. I woke up scared and crying, but it felt so real, and I just knew whatever I saw was very evil. The next day, me and my dad were watching one of those ghost shows like My Ghost Story on TV. In the episode, this woman was in her room, and all of a sudden she felt like something wasn't right. She turned her light switch on just in time to see a weird black shadow sphere thing with legs scurry under her bed. It pretty much looked exactly like the thing I saw in my dream. I flipped the fuck out. The next story is called But Then Who Was Phone? Working late in the lab at school, I had to grab something from an upstairs classroom. It's after midnight and the entire building was empty and dark. Suddenly, the phone in the classroom starts ringing, so after the heart attack, I decided to answer it. Silence, not even a dial tone, so I hop out and go back to my dorm. The next day, I have class in that room, so I ask my professor how often people call the classroom phone by mistake. He looks at me funny and says the phone in that room has been disconnected for years. Ew. The next story is called The Murder Chair. Took my 3-year-old daughter on a hiking trail through some local woods. I let my daughter lead the way, nearly overgrown and barely there trail. Heading deeper into a more isolated portion of the forest than I'd ever been to previously, we came across a grisly sight. A white plastic lawn chair tied to a tree by a rope, the seat covered in splatters of days-old, dried, viscous fluid. I snapped that pic and then picked up my daughter and noped the fuck right out of there. After the fact, I've come to a far less creepy explanation for what we saw, but in the moment, it was creepy as fuck. The next story is called The Crow. I was working with a young client with childhood onset schizophrenia. This individual was a harm to themselves and others. My back was to the window in my office when they started screaming, "The man in black is here, he followed me. No, no." As I'm trying to calm them down, they start to sob. "He is out the window, I can hear him. He says he wants to hurt you. He will come in here and take your skin off. He wants you dead." I am trying to calm them down, moving through the plan we had when they were overcome by their hallucinations. Then I hear a tapping on the window. There's an enormous black crow at the window, tapping on the glass extremely hard with its beak. The bird was just staring at me. It would tap, bringing its head back and slamming its beak into the glass. Then staring, over and over again. I got the client calmed down and we ended. The bird was still there. We leave the office. The bird was still there when I came back. Next client comes in. Bird was still there. That bird sat at my window for hours, staring and tapping. The next story is called Peeping Tom. I don't know if this counts because I was too young to actually remember this happening, but one day when I was in elementary school, my mom picked up my brother and I from school, and we stopped to play at a local park on the way home. We ended up leaving early because there was a sketchy truck parked there, not in the parking lot, and my mom was a little uneasy about it. Later that night, my mom was getting ready for bed and screamed because there was a guy peering through her bedroom window. My dad ran outside, but the guy was gone already. A month or so later, we were watching America's Most Wanted, and my mom recognized one of the guys as the guy who had been peering through her window. That's wild. His truck was identical to the sketchy truck she had seen at the park. He had murdered his girlfriend's parents. Girlfriend and brother were stabbed but survived. The next story is called Benign Ghost. Almost every night my TV turns itself on at some point between 3 and 5 a.m. Hell no. It's time to get rid of that TV. Okay, I used to think that maybe it was one of my cats who walked across the remote, but I've tried hiding the remote, putting it places where they couldn't get to it, and it still happens. Now I just turn the sound all the way down before I go to bed. The TV will still get turned on, but at least then I won't be woken up by it. I'm sure there's some reasonable explanation for it, but I rather like the